Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going deep on something we all deal with. Fear.
Oh, yeah, fear. It's everywhere, right?
Seriously. For this deep dive, we've got advice from the NHS Health Direct Australia. Even some insights on fear of failure from Ramsey Solutions.
We've also got a ton of perspectives from therapists at Real Life Counseling, the Dot Canada, Better Up.
Plus some research from Cambridge University, EU Business School, and, believe it or not, even actor Josh Pace.
By the end of this, you'll have a whole toolkit for understanding your fears and, hopefully, moving forward with more confidence.
So I think we can all agree, fear is a pretty universal experience.
Absolutely. Every single person experiences fear. It's totally natural.
It's like built into us, right? Our body's alarm system.
Exactly. And the science behind it is actually pretty fascinating. The Dot Canada source talked about the amygdala, this little part of your brain.
Oh yeah, the amygdala.
It basically kicks into gear when it senses danger.
Like imagine walking down a dark street and you hear a noise.
Right. Suddenly your heart's racing, you're sweating, ready to run.
That's the amygdala, flooding your system with those stress hormones.
Yep. It's prepping you to either fight or flee.
But here's the thing. Sometimes that alarm system goes off when there's no real danger.
Oh, all the time.
Like think about giving a presentation. You can feel like you're facing a tiger, but really it's just your coworkers.
It's so true.
And that's where I think that NHS advice comes in. They really emphasize ditching those unrealistic expectations, like trying to be perfect all the time.
Oh, that's a big one. That pressure just makes the fear worse.
For sure. That need to get everything just right can be totally paralyzing. But how do we even begin to understand those fears?
Well, a lot of sources recommended journaling. The NHS, Real Life Counseling, Better Up, EU Business School.
They all seem to agree that journaling can be a powerful tool.
Yeah, it's like shining a light on those fears that are hiding in the shadows.
You start to see patterns, identify what triggers you.
Exactly. And you can even pinpoint those physical sensations you get when fear takes over.
It's like becoming a detective of your own inner world.
I love that.
But, what I found really interesting is that Vinmec actually pointed out that sometimes you can't figure out why you're afraid.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Fear isn't always logical.
Sometimes it's rooted in past experiences that we don't even consciously remember.
But the good news is, even if we don't know exactly why, we can still learn to manage that fear.
For sure. We have the power to do that.
Now, sometimes those fears are based on like our own misinterpretations, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that Better Up example with the coworkers chatting. Our anxious brains might instantly jump to conclusions like, oh no, they're talking about me.
Right.
It shows how much our perceptions can shape our reality.
They could be talking about, I don't know, the latest game. But if you're prone to anxiety, it can feel like a personal attack.
It's like our brains are always on the lookout for threats, and sometimes they misfire.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Now, let's talk about a specific fear, one that I think a lot of people can relate to. Fear of failure. The Ramsey Solutions article really goes deep on this.
Oh, yeah. They talk about how tying your self-worth to your accomplishments can make failure feel, like, devastating.
Right. Because it's like building your entire identity on this foundation of success.
So then when failure happens, and it happens to everyone, it feels like the whole thing's crumbling.
Exactly. And Ramsey Solutions even suggested that sometimes this fear of failure has, deeper psychological roots. They recommended talking to a therapist if that's the case.
It's always a good idea to get professional help if you need it.
But they also had some practical strategies for everyone. I thought that Michael Jordan quote they shared was really inspiring.
Which one is that?
He said, "I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed."
Wow, that's powerful. It really reframes failure, doesn't it?
Totally. It's not the opposite of success. It's part of the journey. Even Michael Jordan, one of the greatest basketball players ever, he embraced failure.
He saw it as a stepping stone.
So let's dive into some of those actionable strategies for overcoming fear that we saw throughout all these sources. One that kept popping up was challenging your thoughts.
Oh, yeah. The NHS had a great example. Someone who's terrified of getting stuck in an elevator.
They suggested asking yourself these logical questions, like
Yeah.
how many times have I actually been stuck in an elevator?
Or, does this elevator look well maintained?
It's about putting that fear on trial. Is there any real evidence to support it?
Right. Another strategy we saw in the Health Shots source and in Josh Pies' interview is mindfulness and reframing.
Mindfulness, I feel like that's a bit of a buzzword these days. But Josh Pies had a very interesting way of explaining it.
How so?
He said, you're a vibrator. Like we're all just atoms vibrating.
Okay, I can see how that would make mindfulness less intimidating. It's not about getting lost in the I'm anxious story. It's about noticing the physical sensations.
Right, those vibrations in your chest, that tightness in your stomach.
And he even suggested giving those vibes nicknames, which is a form of reframing. So instead of, I'm nervous, you could say, oh, hello, Shushy, you're back again.
I love that. It kind of takes away the power, right? Oh, it's just sushi making an appearance. No big deal.
Exactly. And the third step in his approach is write it. Don't hide it. Allow those sensations to be there. Speak authentically from that place, even if you're feeling a little shaky.
It's about acknowledging that you're human, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, and that can actually make you more relatable and engaging.
For sure. Now, the Health Direct Australia source talked about exposure therapy, which is gradually exposing yourself to the thing you're afraid of, but in a safe environment, of course.
Right. The key is to start small and work your way up. Like, if you're terrified of public speaking, you might start by practicing in front of a mirror.
Then maybe with a friend, then a
Right.
small group of friends, and eventually, work your way up to presenting to a larger audience.
And they really emphasized that it's important to seek professional guidance if needed, especially for phobias or trauma. A therapist can help create a safe and effective plan.
Absolutely. Professional support can be invaluable in those situations. And speaking of support, Ramsey Solutions, Health Shots, and Vinmec, they all highlighted the value of talking to others about your fears.
Yeah, it could be a friend, a family member, a therapist, even a support group. The point is you don't have to go through this alone. Sharing your struggles can really help.
It can help you gain perspective, feel less isolated, and get the encouragement you need to keep going.
It's like that saying, a problem shared is a problem halved. And when it comes to fear, sometimes just voicing it can take away some of its power.
It's like letting the air out of a balloon.
And on that note of taking action, so many of these sources emphasize that action is the antidote to fear.
Like getting out there and doing the thing even if it scares you.
Exactly. And I loved that Rent the Runway example from the Better Up article.
What was that about?
The founders, they started with this simple experiment, a pop-up shop on their college campus.
To see if anyone would rent designer dresses.
Yeah, talk about facing your fears. I can't even imagine the nerves.
But that small step led to this hugely successful business.
It just goes to show, even when we're terrified, taking even a tiny step can create momentum, build confidence.
It's like that quote, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Before we move on, though, I do want to touch on self-care, which came up in the Health Match and Vinmec sources.
Oh yeah, self-care is so important.
They emphasize things like relaxation techniques, breathing exercises.
Making healthy lifestyle choices, it's all connected.
Self-care is like putting on your own oxygen mask first. When you take care of your physical and mental health, you're better equipped to handle stress, face those fears.
It's like building up your reserves so you have more energy and resilience for when things get tough.
Now, it is important to acknowledge that sometimes fear and anxiety, it can become so overwhelming that self-help just isn't enough. Both Better Up and Health Direct Australia recommend seeking professional help in those cases.
And there's absolutely no shame in that.
Not at all. Seeking help is a sign of strength. It takes courage to admit you need support.
It really does.
And think about it. If you had a physical health issue, you wouldn't hesitate to see a doctor. Mental health is just as important.
100%.
Better Up actually provided a list of symptoms that might indicate a need for professional support. Things like experiencing panic attacks, having trouble sleeping, feeling constantly on edge.
Avoiding social situations.
Even physical symptoms like a racing heart, dizziness.
Those are all signs that fear and anxiety might be interfering with your daily life. It's so important to reach out for help if you're experiencing those things.
And the good news is, there are so many resources available these days. Therapists, counselors, support groups, even online platforms.
There's something out there for everyone.
The key is to find what works best for you. And to remember, you are not alone in this.
You are not alone. Now, I want to shift gears for a moment and look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
The Cambridge University research asked this thought-provoking question. If technology could one day erase specific fears, would we want that?
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Yes.
Like deleting fear from our brains.
Right. On one hand, it's tempting. Think about erasing traumatic memories or those really debilitating phobias.
But then it gets complicated.
Exactly. What would that even mean for our humanity? Could we even function properly without some level of fear?
Fear keeps us safe. It stops us from doing reckless things.
Exactly. And what about the good aspects of fear? That thrill you get from watching a scary movie or riding a roller coaster. Would we lose those too?
It raises so many ethical questions.
It really does, and I think it highlights that overcoming fear isn't about erasing it entirely. It's about learning to manage it, understanding its role in our lives.
Using it as a catalyst for growth.
Yeah, it's more about dancing with fear rather than trying to fight it.
So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive, remember that overcoming fear is a journey. It's not a destination.
It's ongoing. It's about learning, growing, and pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
There will be setbacks, there will be triumphs, but each experience, even the challenging ones, they can teach us something valuable about ourselves.
For sure. And remember those tools and strategies we talked about. Understanding your fears, challenging your thoughts, practicing mindfulness, seeking support, taking action.
All of those things can help you build resilience, cultivate courage, and create a life that feels more fulfilling and authentically you.
Absolutely. And don't forget about self-care. Nourishing your body and mind can make a huge difference in how you handle stress and fear.
It's like filling up your tank so you can keep going on this journey. And as you move forward, keep that question from the Cambridge research in mind.
What does it mean to be human in a world where we could potentially control our fears so precisely?
It's a question that really makes you think. It highlights the complexity of fear and its role in our lives. It reminds us that fear isn't something to be eradicated. It's part of what makes us human.
And that's okay.
It's about finding that balance, respecting our limits, but also pushing ourselves to grow.
Exactly. And the resources we've explored today, they can provide guidance and support along the way. There's so much out there to help you understand and navigate the world of fear.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sometimes challenging but always fascinating world of fear. We hope you've gained some valuable insights, some practical tools to help you on your own journey.
Remember, even the bravest people experience fear. It's what you do with that fear that really matters.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Yeah, it can really make a difference just to, get those fears out in the open.
Right. And speaking of taking action, I mean, that was a theme that came up in so many of these sources.
Taking action is the key, right?
Yeah, I think so. They all emphasize that action is like the antidote to fear.
You got to get out there and do the thing, even if it's scary.
Exactly. And I don't know, I just love that Rent the Runway example from the Better Up article. Remember that one?
Refresh my memory.
Okay, so the founders, they started with this really simple experiment, like a pop-up shop on their college campus.
Oh, right. To see if anyone would rent designer dresses.
Yeah. I mean, talk about facing your fears. Right? Can you imagine the nerves?
You can't even imagine. But it's amazing because that one little step led to this huge business. It's incredible.
It really shows that even when you're totally terrified, just taking one tiny step can get the ball rolling.
Build your confidence, too.
It's like that quote, a journey of 1,000 miles.
Begins with a single step. Yeah, I love that one.
But before we move on, I do want to touch on self-care, which, the Health Match and Vinbeck sources both mention.
Oh, self-care is so important.
Right. Like they emphasize things like relaxation techniques, breathing exercises,
Yeah.
healthy lifestyle choices, all that good stuff.
It's all connected. You got to take care of yourself.
It's like putting on your own oxygen mask first,
Okay.
When you take care of yourself physically, mentally, you're just better equipped to handle all the stress and to face those fears.
It's like you're building up your reserves, giving yourself the energy and resilience you need for when things get rough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, we do have to acknowledge that sometimes fear and anxiety, they can get really intense, to the point where self-help just isn't enough.
Right.
Both Better Up and Health Direct Australia
Yeah.
recommended seeking professional help if that's the case, which, by the way, there's absolutely no shame in doing.
No shame at all. In fact, it's a sign of strength. It takes a lot of courage to admit you need help.
It really does. And, I mean, think about it. If you had a physical health issue, you wouldn't think twice about going to the doctor.
Right.
Mental health is just as important.
Totally agree.
And, Better Up actually listed some specific symptoms that might indicate a need for professional support. Things like having panic attacks, trouble sleeping, feeling constantly on edge.
Avoiding social situations.
Yeah, even physical symptoms like a racing heart or dizziness.
If you're experiencing those kinds of things, it's definitely a good idea to reach out. Could mean that fear and anxiety are starting to interfere with your everyday life.
And the good news is there are so many resources available. Therapists, counselors, support groups, even online platforms.
There's something out there for everyone.
The important thing is to find what works best for you. And to remember, you don't have to go through this alone.
Never. Now, want to switch gears for a second. I want to look at the bigger picture here.
Okay, sure.
The Cambridge University research, they posed this really interesting question. They asked, if technology could one day erase specific fears, poof, gone, would we even want that?
It's almost like a sci-fi movie thing, right? Deleting fear from our brains.
I know. On one hand, it sounds kind of amazing. Think about erasing trauma, or those phobias that just completely hold people back.
Yeah.
But then it gets kind of tricky.
Complicated.
Totally. What would that even mean for us as humans? Could we even function properly without NY fear?
Well, fear does keep us safe, right? It stops us from doing really reckless things.
Exactly. And what about the good parts of fear? Like the thrill you get from, I don't know, a scary movie or a roller coaster.
We lose those, too.
I think it raises a ton of ethical questions. And it makes you realize that overcoming fear, it's not really about erasing it completely. It's more about, I don't know, learning to manage it.
Understanding it.
Right. Understanding its role in our lives and maybe even using it as a way to grow.
Almost like, I don't know, dancing with fear instead of trying to fight it.
I like that.
So, to kind of sum up this part of our deep dive, remember, overcoming fear, it's a journey, not a destination.
It's an ongoing process of learning, pushing yourself, and pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
Exactly. There will be setbacks, for sure, but there will also be triumphs. And each experience, even the tough ones, can teach you something valuable about yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And don't forget about all those tools and strategies we talked about. Understanding your fears, challenging your thoughts, practicing mindfulness.
Getting support when you need it, taking action,
All those things, they can really help you build resilience, cultivate courage.
and create a life that feels more fulfilling, more, authentically you.
It really is. It's like giving yourself what you need to keep going on this journey.
This journey of growth and self-discovery.
Mm,
And, as we kind of wrap things up, remember that question from the Cambridge research?
the one about erasing fears with technology.
Yeah. Like, what does it even mean to be human in a world where we could control our fears so precisely?
It's a big question for sure. I mean, it makes you really stop and think, doesn't it, about the role of fear in our lives, how complex it really is.
And I think it reminds us that fear isn't something that we need to just, get rid of. It's part of what makes us human.
Yeah.
It's more about finding that balance,
Yeah,
like respecting our limits, but also, pushing ourselves to grow.
exactly. Finding that sweet spot. And, all those resources we talked about today, those can offer some guidance and support along the way.
There really is so much out there, so much information to help us understand and navigate this whole world of fear.
Right. You don't have to figure it all out on your own.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of fear.
Yeah.
Hopefully you've learned some new things today.
Maybe you picked up a few tools to help you on your own journey. Because remember, everyone feels fear.
Even the bravest people.
Yeah. What matters is what you do with that fear.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode. If you found this conversation helpful or relatable, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with others who might benefit from it. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means a lot, and it helps us bring more valuable content just for you. See you in the next episode.